first, the main thing to start making music is you go in here, enter studio, and it'll bring you into the DAW or digital audio workstation layout. So you would click on music here. It just gives you this prompt every time. So we're making music. And so now here we are. So I know some people mentioned they're familiar with other DAWs like Logic, Pro Tools, etc. So one of the things that's really cool about Soundtrap is that this really mirrors the functionality of all of the professional digital audio workstation softwares out there. So the things that students learn in Soundtrap, despite being a browser-based platform, they will be able to transfer these skills into other programs and softwares in the future if they're interested in that. So it's really cool in that way. So, and if any of you, like you mentioned, are already familiar with some of those other softwares, then you kind of have it. A lot of this will be really familiar, so that's great too. So a lot of what just super quick overview, you got the timeline, measure numbers across the top, measure 1, 2, 3, 4, going left to right. When you hit play, this playhead marker will move from measure to measure across time. You just have your basic playback controls down here, like how far into the song in time are you, the record button, stop, rewind, fast forward. And then if you stop somewhere in the track, this becomes the go back to the beginning button. So that's really useful. Down here you have your key. There is nothing in it yet, so we're not in a key. The default tempo is 120 beats per minute, but you can change this by either tapping on this, like by clicking on it, and it'll tell you what it is, or you can change it this way or this way. So for now, I'm just going to leave it back at 120. But and you have a metronome function down here that you can turn off or on. Title your song up here, and then this stuff you don't need to worry about too much. The save button, obviously we need to save all the time. And that's actually a huge thing for students. I've had a lot of situations where they forget to save, so I always remind people all the time to be saving their projects whenever they can. Okay, cool. So one of the things that I like to do to get students started, especially if they're not familiar with this kind of stuff, is using loops. So what you can do here, we'll see how everything works, but this is kind of how I would walk a student through it. So over here, this eighth note purple button is your loop library, and Soundtrap has a huge loop library in here, including a lot of music or loops and samples from producers in the industry, as well as their kind of in-house ones. So sometimes kids will see like sounds from producers they know from songs they hear on Spotify and stuff, or show up in here too. So it's really cool for them. So you have a bunch of filters up here because there's literally just hundreds and hundreds of sounds to pick from. So what I like to do is to start kids off with finding like a melodic loop to kind of be the genesis of everything else, because a lot of kind of like coming up with a melody or generating a lot of like musical content, like just like from scratch, sometimes can be a bit of too big of a leap a lot of the times. So let's say, for example, I was playing around with these earlier. If you like, okay, I want this song to have guitar in it, you can click on guitar, and now that will filter down to all of your guitar loops and samples that are in here. And there's still like tons. So the way they're organized here is alphabetically. The word like the Atlantis, or if you scroll further down, Corazon or Bedroom Show, this is describing a pack of sounds, and then to the right of it is the specific sound from that pack. And so all the packs of sounds are organized alphabetically. So cream, dark juice. And what I would honestly recommend to your students to like maybe sometimes go to the bottom and go up, because otherwise you find a lot of students pick like the top, like this one or something, and so then like everyone's playing, like everyone has like the same song start. So sometimes it's really nice because it is literally just alphabetical, like go down to the bottom. I found one in here that I wanted to use just for this demo. So you can click the play button next to them to hear what they sent to demo them. So this is the one that I was thinking of using. So if you find one that you're going to use, you just click on it and drag it into your project. Like that. So now it will take the key of whatever loop you just picked. If you hover over it, it tells you E minor and it also automatically changes whatever the first thing you put in here. It will set the key of your project to that. So our first melodic loop was E minor, so now we're in E minor. And now it's feeling a little fast for me. So if I want now, I can go down to like something a little slower, and then you can adjust your audio this way. It will like stretch it to match. So I'm gonna adjust it. So it's an 8-bar loop. And this is the thing that I actually really emphasize with students is like, if you first things first, like build a really solid 8-bar loop, because then you'll find later it's easy to kind of start arranging the rest of your song from that. So let's go ahead and do that now. The other thing you see is turned on here is this purple bar up here. This is your loop bar. You can either double click on it or single click on it, or you used to be able to. But the button over here, this little recycle button, is your loop button. So when that's turned on and it's purple like this, it means that anywhere between these two arrows in this purple bar, it will loop. So like it will go back. If I start it from here, it'll go back to the beginning. So that's really helpful if you're just brainstorming your ideas. You don't want to keep hitting play, backspace, play, stop, that. So I'm going to leave that on for right now. 8 bars. Most of the loops in here are 8 bars or 2 bars or 4 bars. Cool. So then there's no right or wrong way to do this, but a lot of times what I do then is add like drums. So you could add something from over here, find another loop. And I think for a lot of students, like in their first couple projects, that's a good idea. Do just loops, because it's kind of just like working with Legos. Like, okay, now I can add drums, find one that match, etc. But if just to kind of show you guys all the different functions of it, I'm going to add our own drum track. So you add a new track, just hit the plus button over here, and it'll pull up this window of what do you want to add. So I'm going to say drum and beats. Now it opens up this instrument window, and if you want to get rid of this, the X button, if you want to bring that back next to your each track, so like each instrument is listed down the left-hand panel here. So we have our guitar up here, right? And then we have our drums. And so if I want those to come back, I can either hit show instrument, or if you hit the little icon next to it. There's a lot of ways to get back to this. So once you have this open, there's 3 tabs. Instrument, so this shows like a literal like you're sitting at the drum kit, and these are the numbers and letters are all like on your keyboard. So like if you hit A, it's your kick drum, hit T, it's a tom, like that. X is the rim shot, etc. And then you have controls for like reverb. Do you want it to go pan to like hear it on the left side of your head or the right side of your head? Volume. Don't really need to do too much with those right now. But what we're gonna do is you can pick here, like we've added drums, but now there's a lot of options for like what kind of drums do you want. So if you click on this box, this is our like instrument box. And so now we see we have drums selected, then it will ask you what kind of drums. And right now it's set to machines, so like drum machines, electronic drums, as opposed to like a drum kit. It's like a much more acoustic sound. There's a few different options here, but I'm just gonna leave it on the default one, which is vanilla. They call it vanilla, and it's like their default drums. It's based off an 808 drum machine. So what I'm going to do is go over to the second tab here, which is your pattern. So this is actually a really cool way to like visually compose your drum patterns. And this is something that again, you think Logic has one of these. I think FL Studio has a drum programmer similar to this one. I use Ableton personally. It doesn't, but it's all good. So what we're going to do here is it has your kick drum, your snare drum, and your hi-hat down the left. And then each square is like a 16th note. And again, you have your measures here, like measure 1, measure 2, measure 3. And they're kind of organized into like 4 groups of 4. So 4 beats, each one with 4 16th notes in it. So what you can do is you click on the squares, and then that comes up with like when when the time comes to that square, it'll play that sound. So I'm just going to type in this pattern. This just comes with a bit of practice. And now hi-hats down here, I'm just going to do kind of like a metronome, like every eighth note like this. Now, two quick things. One, when you open up the drums, it'll turn on your metronome by default sometimes, so I'm just going to turn that off. And then up here, this is another thing that Soundtrap does by default. By the way, you can zoom in just by like pinching on your computer trackpad, or you can hit the plus and minus buttons to zoom in. And it's also really important to use Google Chrome. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So Soundtrap can be a little buggy if you're on like Safari. I don't have a PC, so I haven't tried it on like Internet Explorer or Firefox, but Soundtrap recommends Google Chrome. So especially if kids have like a Chromebook from school or something like that, it works out great because they're on Chrome anyway. Cool, so what you noticed here is that we have two clips, like two little segments here that are separated. That's just the Soundtrap automatically adds a one measure loop here. So what we're gonna do actually is, this is where we can talk about the functions that are on here. So on each clip, and so this is what we call MIDI. So you see, like, you can kind of see the rhythm pattern mirrored here from what you see down here, versus this top track is audio. You just see the waveform of the audio. So this is like a recording of guitar, and then this is kind of like, MIDI is kind of like sheet music, where it's going to play this instrument, the drum kit, according to the notes that we typed in. So it's two different things here. If you add too many of these MIDI things at once, sometimes it can overload it. So just be mindful of that. But so these controls here, you can drag the bottom left and right hand corner, the little arrows with the parenthesis, to adjust when does this clip start and end. And then this top icon here is for looping. So if we drag that out, it will loop this one measure pattern over and over and over. So what I want right now is a two measure drum pattern. So even though I just typed that in, I want to drag this out. Should have done that first, but it's okay. So now this is a two measure. It's going from measure one to two. It's a two measure drum pattern here. So then I'm just going to real quick down here retype in this to make sure it's the same. And then we can listen to it and decide if it's what we want. So then I'm going to loop this. So this two measure pattern will repeat for a whole 8-bar loop here. And I'll go back to the beginning and hit play. Cool. All right. So this is, I'm feeling it's a little bit fast. So if you do that, you can kind of treat this as like double time. Well, we're just going to leave it for now in the interest of time. But anyway, you can play around with this. One thing that I actually did want to change is I don't want this same snare hitting so many times. So if you want to change the sounds that are in here, you can hit the drop down box here and it'll pull up the rest of your drum kit, or you can add one. So I'm going to add, they have a second snare in here. And so I'm just going to swap out some of my snares that it's like, and then if you make this change here, it'll make it for your whole loop. So you don't have to like go in and retype that throughout every measure. Like that. Cool. This is all still feeling like a little bit fast for me, so I'm going to bring it back down to like 104. Let's make it like 96. And these are the conversations you can have with your students, right? It's like, okay, how are we feeling about this tempo? How are we feeling about the vibe? Okay, that's better. Great. So now I'm just going to add a couple more instruments to show you a few other things. So at this point, you can add, especially like later on, once kids have made a few of these, you can add your own keyboard instrument this way. And again, it is mapped out onto your computer's keyboard. So like hitting Z on your keyboard will play C3. You can also just click on these. Similar to the drums here, you can choose what kind of piano or what kind of keyboard you want. Change your octaves here, sustain, these other things. So I'm gonna do, I actually found a fun one. I'm gonna play the zither. There's a lot of fun sounds in here. It's really extensive. And this is one thing, if you're a teacher and you have a MIDI keyboard available to you, like I have one plugged in right now to your computer. You go up to settings, MIDI settings, and it will pull up your keyboard here. So if for teaching purposes you don't want to fiddle around with like your computer keyboard, it does support plugging one in here. So I'm just going to play a little harmony by playing notes on this keyboard, but I'm going to do it with my MIDI keyboard. So in order to do that, you want to just make sure, it's really important you make sure you have the instrument that you're about to record selected. So if I'm on the drums, I want to make sure I click on the zither, and this R button for recording means that this one is set to record now. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to hit record, and it's going to give me like a couple measures of count in. So I'm going to turn on the metronome so that you kind of see what happens. I'm going to hit record. It's going to be like ready, 2, 3, 4, and then you start. So I'm going to make sure this is set at the beginning. It's like right at the beginning of the song. Okay, ready, 2, give me 2 measures. Great. Okay, now, so I have a 2 measure loop. So this is too long. I'm going to drag this back, and then I'm going to loop this out. So I can turn that, that 4 measure loop into 8 bars that way. And now this shows one other really cool thing that, again, is really applicable to all the other DAW softwares out there, is the piano roll. So this is a really fun one for kids to work with. You can go in here and you can adjust the length, placement, and pitch of your notes. So this is everything that I just played. Again, it's MIDI, so I can move this up and down the keyboard here. But I like the notes, so what I'm actually going to do is click, drag, and I can highlight all of them. And I want to quantize these. So we're going to go in and go to 16th notes. What that means is that obviously people don't play like robots, but if you want things to really line up, you can do that, and it will automatically like snap them to the grid to whatever rhythm you choose. So I chose 16th notes, and now they're all going to be right on the beat. Obviously, you don't have to do that, and there's a whole school of thought about why that sounds bad and stuff. That's just opinion. So, but for like having everything line up for the sake of teaching and stuff, it's really great. The option there to kind of save yourself a lot of time as opposed to like individually dragging all these. And again, looping it means you don't have to go in and individually drag and move like all 8 measures, just focus on your looping pattern. And then at that point, you can do other things too. So you can, I'll wrap this up here pretty quick. You can add more things. There's all tons and tons and tons of sounds. So if you want to say, for example, I'm going to add like just like a upright piano. Oh, what am I, instead of that, I forgot to mention bass. So I'm going to go in, click on bass sound. So it has like your acoustic bass, electric bass, 808, like kick drum type basses, synth basses, all these different things. So I'm just going to do this one. I'm going to adjust this is just stuff that I had thought about previously. I'm going to adjust this so that it doesn't play for as long. Now this is ready to record again. So I'm going to hit the record button and record a bass line along with this. And then we're pretty much, I'll wrap this up and we'll go into what we're doing. But same thing as before. All right, and so that, again, same process, make it a 4-bar loop. Be careful that these all line up, or else when you loop, if they're not lined up, then all your loops will be like slightly rhythmically displaced from each other. And then again, I'm going to go into the piano roll for this and do the same thing. Highlight all of them, right click, quantize to the 16th note. And now hopefully this will sound a little bit more on the beat. And then if some of these are spilling over a little bit, you can go in and like drag on the edges of them to line them up to your grid rhythmically, like this, for example. And you can zoom in the same way here that you can zoom in. And it all zooms together. So when you move your playhead marker around, it shows you in here where you are in time. Cool. All right. So now we have like an 8-bar loop. Let me turn my metronome off. last little thing I didn't mention is that your other controls on here, if you want to turn down individual instruments, like I think my bass is super loud right now, you can drag this wheel to turn them up or down. Next to that is the headphones, which is solo. So if you are like want to focus on one thing, you can hit the solo button. You can do that to multiple at a time. Conversely, you can mute tracks if you want to only block one out. What I'm going to do now is, again, something you can do with your students in your session. So to share them with you guys, I have them as projects here, and I'm going to share them as an assignment. So when you do that, you go to the file here, go to your little menu. So this is for the electro pop one. Go to share assignment. And I think there's all these cool ways that they integrate with Google Classroom stuff, but I'm going to just share using the link, and that's probably the easiest thing for everyone. So now if I copy this link, and like I'll put that in the Zoom chat, which is what likely you'll do with your students. So this is lo-fi is this, and then I'll just type them all in here real quick. Same thing. Copy link, EDM. And now when you all, or in future when your student opens this link, you'll each have like, everyone who opens the link creates a new copy of that project that you can save individually, independent of everyone else. So then, just to show you an example of what that looks like on my end or eventually your end, when you go to an assignment folder, for example, like this is one that we did with a BPS program in October. There was this one project that I shared, 8-bar phrase, just like the ones I shared with you guys, and then everyone's individual version of that, all of these students, they all show up in here in a folder for you as the teacher. So that's how this works. Okay, so yeah, everyone has those links now. And I think somebody asked how many students can use your account at the same time. Yeah, so up here, it will tell you how many, well, I'm not sure it'll show for all of you guys right now since you're in the BMP's program, but like if your school, for example, had an EDU account, it tells you how many seats are available. So right now we've used 18 out of 50, and you can like add more people and stuff like that. But of the people using, like, say you have 40 kids, 40 out of 50 or something, they can all use it at the same time. There's no limit whatsoever as to like, of the kids who are in your group, how many can use it at once. That's not limited.